U.S. President Joe Biden said U.S. troops would defend Taiwan if China attacked.
The U.S. Senate Foreign Affairs Committee passed the Taiwan Policy Act, which would give Taiwan military assistance.
And global lawmakers are telling their governments to sanction China if it attacks Taiwan.
And in #Taiwan, I'll go over images from two major earthquakes that hit the country this past weekend. This is Taiwan Insider.
Welcome to the show. A lot of global leaders have been moving to deter China from attacking Taiwan. In a 60 Minutes interview, U.S. President Joe Biden said the U.S. would send troops to defend Taiwan if China attacked. What's the significance of that remark? Well, I asked Stanford University political scientist Kharis Templeman, who heads Stanford's Project on Taiwan in the Indo-Pacific.
Well, number one, it's consistent with what he said 3 other times during his presidency. So it's not just a throwaway remark. I think it reflects a sincere conviction on his part that he could and would and should put Americans in harm's way to defend Taiwan if it came to that. I would note that U.S. law and past policy actually gives the president a great deal of flexibility to decide how, in what manner, or even whether to intervene if there is a conflict over Taiwan. Ultimately, the U.S. defense backstop that Taiwan depends on for its security depends on who is in the White House and whether they are personally committed to defending Taiwan. So I think Taiwanese should be reassured that this president is willing to state repeatedly that he cares about Taiwan and he thinks it's in America's interest to intervene.
Well, I think it is interesting that the White House always has to walk back its policy, though, right? And say that nothing has changed, but is actually not showing any strategic ambiguity anymore, right? He's saying that the U.S. would defend Taiwan.
Strategic ambiguity is intended to engage in dual deterrence. It's both to deter the PRC from moving on Taiwan, but also to deter the Taiwanese from declaring independence. From the U.S. perspective, that's not something we would support. And so saying he would defend Taiwan is a way to kind of tip or to weight the scales a little bit on this dual deterrence issue towards deterring China. The concern in Washington right now is not really that the leadership of Taiwan is going to steer Taiwan towards a de jure declaration of independence in the near term. The short-run concern is much more about the rising threat and the hard military threat that Beijing poses to Taiwan and Xi Jinping's potential willingness to use military force to achieve unification.
So I think that is why there is this Taiwan Policy Act, right? There's a lot more military assistance. What would you say is the most significant aspect of that act?
The military assistance is a big part of it. For the first time, we'd have foreign military assistance. So in the past, the United States has approved weapon sales to Taiwan. The Taiwan side requests sales, and the U.S. side then debates or considers those requests. Sometimes they approve them, sometimes they don't. This would be the U.S. providing, without any requests from the Taiwan side, a certain amount of military aid. Some of it loans, some of it in complete, just flat-out grants. That's a shift in U.S. policy. There's a couple other things there that I don't know. I don't know if they will make it into the final bill. And the more symbolic parts of these, for instance, treating Taiwan as a major non-NATO ally, in effect, the U.S. already does that. So that's the kind of thing that has mostly a symbolic impact, but that gets Beijing really riled up. And so in my view, that's the kind of thing that really should not be in that act. We should be focusing on concrete, pragmatic, short-run things that can be done to increase Taiwan's ability to defend itself and focus less on the kind of high-profile symbolic things that just aggravate the CCP in Beijing.
So do you think that this bill, if it passes, will deter China or provoke China?
China gets provoked about everything that the United States does with regard to Taiwan. The question is, of course, they won't like it. They'll object. The question is whether the potential costs that they could pose on Taiwan and the United States are worth the potential benefits of the bill. And that remains to be seen. I mean, it kind of depends on what is in the bill and what the PRC is willing to do to punish Taiwan and the U.S. But if we think of the PRC's kind of set of policy options to impose a punishment, they've already used a lot of those options. They've started using them in 2016 after Tsai Ing-wen did not accept the 1992 consensus. And so they're running thin. If we think of these as arrows in their policy quiver, they've used most of the arrows already. And so they don't have a whole lot of credibility when they say, oh, this time we really mean it. We really will threaten you. And so an increasing number of people in Washington see this as a non-credible set of threats. So that's the situation we're in now.
And do you think that the U.S. is really concerned that China will attack Taiwan in the next few years?
I think the majority consensus in the Biden administration is still that an attack is unlikely in the next few years, but that the chances of an attack are growing, and that a lot of what the United States and Taiwan do, what the U.S. and Taiwan do today can actually materially affect the likelihood of an attack 5 or 10 years out. So a lot of the conversations happening now between the U.S. and Taiwan are focused on what can be done to lower the likelihood of an attack in 5 or 10 years.
The EU also passed a resolution recently expressing solidarity with Taiwan and condemning Chinese military drills near Taiwan. To talk with us about that and a recent meeting of global lawmakers at Taiwan's Washington, D.C. estate is Lithuanian Member of Parliament Dovilė Šakalienė.
As one of the co-founders and co-chairs of Interparliamentary Alliance on China, I was visiting Washington, where we had a very clear position that, first of all, this is not a regional issue. Taiwan is a global issue, not only because of the weight in Taiwan in semiconductor industry, which means that if Taiwan, for example, disappears, then from smartphones to automobiles to missiles, if we are talking about defense, we would be screwed, lights out. So that is a pragmatic issue, but also there is values issue, democracy issue. So we very clearly agreed that, first of all, there has to be a contingency plan, just like European Parliament said in its resolution of 15th of September, contingency plan which clarifies what will happen to People's Republic of China should it attack Taiwan, or should it consider its threatening technique where unprecedented military drills were happening which actually posed real risk to people around the area. Another moment is that we clearly said that what we need to do is continue that unanimous teamwork effort that is now happening around Ukraine. By the way, Taiwan really is congratulated on standing so firmly on support to Ukraine, because this is also not about Europe. This is also not only about Ukraine. This is about our global world order. It's about global security, because Mr. Putin and Mr. Xi has very clearly demonstrated their intent to rearrange the world order, saying that they are going to propose a more just world order. So we understand more genocides, more wars, and more concentration camps.
What kind of actions are you proposing to let China know that it will cost them dearly if they increase military aggression towards Taiwan? What kind of methods are we talking about here?
So first of all, introducing more harsh sanctions packages, also to look for other legal avenues to ensure that we are reacting automatically, in the sense that as soon as China violates laws again, international laws, continues its threats, or starts more aggressive behavior towards Taiwan, that we don't need to start considerations, that the plan is ready. So making clear plans, introducing harsher sanctions, making also team decisions. That means that also one of our homework is to make decisions on EU level, because resolution that was adopted on 15th of September is just the beginning. We must have this contingency plan prepared as soon as possible, very clear sanctions list prepared, and very clear execution, operational plan also in place.
The full interviews will be up on social media. Next, Leslie Liao tells us about the earthquakes that shook Taiwan this week.
Over this past weekend, Taiwan was hit by over 100 earthquakes. Now, 2 of those tremors were stronger than all of the others. I'm going to be telling you about them up next in #Taiwan. Wednesday was September 21st. Now, that's a significant date in Taiwan's history because it's the date of the Jiji earthquake, otherwise known as the 921 earthquake after its date. The disaster struck central Taiwan 23 years ago. On September 21st, 1999, a massive earthquake registering 7.7 on the moment magnitude scale struck Nantou County in central Taiwan. It killed around 2,400 people and injured another 11,000. Since then, Taiwan has worked to improve its earthquake safety. September 21st has since become Taiwan's National Disaster Prevention Day in commemoration of the calamitous earthquake. But the weekend leading up to this year's Disaster Prevention Day seemed to test Taiwan's earthquake preparedness. At 9:41 p.m. on Saturday, September 17th, a substantial magnitude 6.5 earthquake hit eastern Taiwan's Taitung County. Then, at 2:44 p.m. on Sunday, another stronger magnitude 6.9 earthquake hit Taitung again. And I felt that one while I was on an elevated subway track, so it rocked my world pretty hard. All in all, Taiwan experienced over 100 earthquakes over the weekend, with the 2 I just mentioned being the most powerful. And the tremors have caused quite a bit of damage. Roads cracked, trains derailed, a school collapsed, concrete overhangs fell apart, a bridge toppled over, and there were also landslides. And we don't even mention all manners of small-scale damage like shelves and furniture falling over. One particularly tragic accident happened at a funerary urn storage facility. The storage cabinets fell over, dropping urns and ash all over the place. Then there's this jaw-dropping footage which shows the roof of a sports center in northern Taiwan's Taoyuan City caving in. You can see people escaping as the ceiling falls down, making the video that much more harrowing. Images like these were all over social media, and the intensity of the earthquakes even caught the attention of international media. And I'm sure there's still more images of the destruction and chaos still surfacing now. Sunday's quake was so strong that it was reportedly felt across the ocean in Hong Kong. As of recording, authorities say that the earthquakes resulted in 1 death and 168 injuries. Aftershocks are still happening, but with less frequency. But that's no reason to let your guard down. Earthquakes are unpredictable and destructive. Now, there's a certain irony in 2 major earthquakes striking Taiwan just days before National Disaster Prevention Day. However, irony aside, it is a good reminder that chaos can strike anytime, and you've got to be ready. Now, in the wake of Saturday and Sunday's earthquakes, a building toppled over in Hualien County, trapping 4 people within. We now take a look at how emergency workers rescued the victims. People scream as they rush to escape from a debris-filled street. One quick turnaround reveals why. A building has collapsed. A magnitude 6.8 earthquake shook Taiwan on Sunday, bringing with it hefty damage. The building shown here is in eastern Taiwan's Hualien County. 4 people were buried in the rubble. Rescuers are shown here navigating the destruction and calling out to survivors. Everything is now slanted, so they must make their way through carefully. One elderly person was lying on the sofa when the earthquake hit. The ceiling fell on top of them, leaving them stuck in place. Rescue workers remove obstructions carefully, making sure that they don't make things worse for the trapped victim. Among the other 3 people trapped is a little girl. Her mother calls out to rescuers, telling them her child is scared. In the end, all survivors are pulled from the wreckage. Afterwards, with the landlord's approval, the county government started demolishing what's left of the building. Workers take care to excavate valuables like cash from the site. All of it is secondary to their main success of the day: bring the people trapped inside to safety. And before we go back to the studio for our final question of the day, here's a look at some of the other stories that are on our radar.
Taiwan's pandemic authorities say mandatory quarantine for arriving visitors could end as early as October 13th. The final date for the policy change will be set depending on how the COVID-19 situation in Taiwan develops. Authorities are easing other COVID-related restrictions as well. Those include removing the deep throat PCR test after landing and raising the weekly cap on arrivals from September 29th. Warships from the US and Canadian navies have sailed through the Taiwan Strait to show the commitment of the US and its allies to a free and open Indo-Pacific. The US Navy often sails through contested waters to show it has freedom of navigation under international law. It was the two navies' second such transit in a year. In a shocking development, the weather in Taiwan has become cooler in the second part of September. This has had an unprecedented effect on some trees. Their leaves have started to turn red. This extraordinary situation has not been seen since around the same time last year. All this can only lead to one startling conclusion: fall is coming.
And we're back in the studio for our final question of the day. Now, in hashtag Taiwan, I told you about the earthquakes that rocked all of Taiwan, and it could have been felt all the way in Hong Kong as well, which meant everybody in Taiwan felt the earthquake. And Natalie, I want to know where you were when you felt the earthquake, so go ahead, tell us.
Well, I was on my computer and on a video chat with family in the States, and it was like shaking, and I'm like, should I go? Should I leave? And then I said, I think I have to leave. Want to take a look at the earthquake? Yeah. The lamp was like shaking.
Was your family like freaking out?
Yeah, they're like, are you guys okay? So.
Oh wow, that is pretty exciting.
Kind of exciting.
In the same vein, I was out at dinner with a few friends of mine, very good friends, and we were having a great time as we always do. And I remember when it started shaking, I didn't realize it was an earthquake at first. I was like, okay, this is turning out to be too good of a time, and I kind of need to dial it back. But that's when the light fixture started swinging, and then people said earthquake. I was like, okay, so I'm doing okay. It's not necessarily me having too much fun at dinner. So that's what we were doing during the earthquake. Anyway, that's about all the time we have for this episode of Taiwan Insider. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Leslie Liao.
And I'm Natalie Tso.
Remember to reach out to us on social media. We're on all the major platforms. You got Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, what have you.
And leave a comment. We love to hear from you.
Anyway, guys, until next week, see you soon.